So far, coming up with favorites, whether it's Vancouver, Boston, Dallas, Ottawa, pretty easy. Kings is more of a challenge. Because Kings, some of the best LA Kings have not been my favorites. Some of my favorites haven't been the best. And since the Kings are a team that, over history, I haven't cheered for a whole lot, it just makes it more difficult. Because I have to think back and go, so when was the last time that I really cheered? Like, going back to 93 when they were in the finals. Was I a fan of their... No. I was mad that they knocked out Toronto. I wanted a Toronto-Montreal final. And, I wasn't happy about that. And then, of course, the Kings at that point knocked out the Canucks and just stuff that went on. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. So there's a lot of reasons I had for not being a Kings fan over the years, and lots of players who were parts of those teams I wasn't a huge fan of. I was never a huge fan of Bernie Nichols. Jimmy Carson's another one I was never a huge fan of. So, again, this list will be my favorites list. It is not a list of the all-time greatest, but it's of my favorites. Now, number 15 is somebody I didn't see a whole lot when I was a kid. And I get the feeling that if I'd watched him play his whole career, Hiroki Vachon would have been much higher. Hiroki Vachon, arguably, I would say after Jonathan Quick, the best goalie they've had in their time. Although Mario Lessard is going to get an honorable mention here. And I know people are going to say, who? Mario Lessard, who was their goaltender in the early 80s, and he looked like he was going to be a big star goaltender. It just never really worked out. But, Hiroki Vachon gets number 15 on the list. Number 14. Number 14 overall. Okay. Again with the 80s. Jim Fox. Jimmy Fox was a member of the LA Kings for a long time. And good, solid, not spectacular, but good, solid forward. And I was a fan of his. The mid-80s Kings, I didn't have necessarily bad feelings towards at all. I enjoyed the early mid-80s Kings as they were part of the misery with the Canucks and the Jets. They were all three of them kind of down in that same range. And it was a hard time. It was honestly a hard time in the mid-80s as a kid saying, well, it's Edmonton and Calgary, and then there's everybody else. And the Kings weren't part of that everybody else. And Jim Fox was part of that everybody else. Number 13. I'll put this guy at 13. I still think Alex Iafallo has a next level. And before people wonder, a rookie with 10 games played to this stage does not make my all-time favorite Kings. Not doing it. So Gabe Vilardi is not on the list. But Alex Iafallo is. And I still think Iafallo, 55, 60 points, I think is within his range. And I think that we'll see as the Kings get better, I think his totals are going to get better. I've been a fan of Iafallo's for the last, I want to say, 2+ years. Really, since this channel kind of blew up, I've been able to watch teams a lot more that I normally wouldn't be paying attention to. And Iafallo has stood out to me for the Kings as a guy that I think is pretty darn good. Number 12. Dustin Brown. Dustin Brown's been a King forever. He's number 1 in games played for the Kings. I respect him. I respect Dustin Brown. I may not have been a huge fan of the 2012-2014 Kings. Although, again, I respected what they did. And I was definitely impressed, especially the 2012 run. The 2012 run of the two impressed me more. But, so Brown gets in there at number 12, again, because I respect him. I do appreciate everything he's done. The offense is touch and go at this stage of his career, but he still does enough of everything else that I don't think it really matters. I think if he wants to play another, I'll say 3 years. I think he's probably got another 3. So, he gets in at number 12. Number 11. Number 11 is defenseman Steve Duchesne. Duchesne was an excellent offensive defenseman. Went through a number of teams, and now that I've got Duchesne on here, don't believe I can put Duchesne on others. I'm challenging myself with these favorite player lists that if I put somebody in one list, I'm not going to put him in the other. So Glenn Murray doesn't get in my 15 favorite LA Kings because I already put him in as a Bruin. So this is one of those challenges I've given myself because, yeah, I could put Tiger Williams in here. I didn't put Tiger Williams in here. I could put Glenn Murray in here, and I thought, no. I've discussed Tiger Williams with Canucks. I think of him more as a Canuck than as a King. And I've already had Glenn Murray in a favorites list. So I'm trying to make sure these lists are all separated out. So, yeah, Steve Duchesne, number 11 there for the Kings. Number 10. Okay. Mark Hardy. Mark Hardy, good, solid defenseman. And again, it's about with the Kings, because I'm not a fan of the team, it's about the players that I respect over the years, the players that, you know, you're going to get a lot of hard work out of them. Players that I just, you know, I enjoy watching them play, even if I may not enjoy the team a whole lot, to be honest. Although, I also need to put this caveat in here as well. My feelings towards the Kings have changed over the last couple of years. There's just something about them dropping into mediocrity that makes me kind of lose that edge I had against them. I don't know, maybe we'll get back into the 80s where I'm like, hey, welcome back. And yeah, it's back in the 80s when they were mediocre, and I actually didn't mind them at all. I would actually cheer when they won games here and there. If they went back to this jersey, it would go a long way. I'm just throwing that out there. Anybody from the Kings who have any decision over anything, at least bring this back as a third. Something, because this logo, I love this logo. I know not everybody did, but I did. Number 9, and again, this is on my favorites. These are my favorite players. I'll go back to a goaltender here. Now, what's interesting is, since I have Kelly Hrudey on the list for the Kings, it means I can't have Kelly Hrudey on the list for the Islanders. And Kelly Hrudey, that 93 run, I wasn't a huge fan of the Kings, but, you know, Kelly Hrudey was a pretty solid goaltender. He was underrated, and I thought, you know, with the Islanders early on, it looked like he was going to be their goaltender for quite a while to come, and then he ends up getting moved. So that was a surprise, I remember, at the time. And for the Kings, he was a pretty decent goaltender. I mean, he wasn't, you know, Vezina level necessarily, but still, pretty good goaltender, and I pay attention to him now as an analyst because I know he kind of knows what he's talking about. I say kind of because we're all going to make mistakes. Everybody does, so, you know, but I trust Kelly Hrudey. Very well spoken as well. So, yeah, Hrudey gets on the list there. I'll go ahead and put a dot there that I've already got him done. Number 8. I mentioned respect, right? And, you know, Drew Doughty, he may not respect the Canucks. You don't lose to a team like that. We all know the whole quote, right? I like Drew Doughty. I think, you know, yes, the Matthew Tkachuk feud and all that other stuff is always going to be there when you talk about Doughty right now. But Doughty's he's been an absolute beast for them for ages now, where he's been chewing up so many minutes. The offense has never quite reached the peak that he was envisioned to when he first came into the league, but it's fine. His all-around game is fantastic, and even if he's not putting up 60 points every year, he's still a very useful player. And, you know, we'll likely look at his contract a few years down the road and say, well, he's getting paid a little bit too much now. But honestly, when I look at the overall picture with the Kings, I can't not respect Drew Doughty for his career and for what he's done. Now, I'm going to throw an honorable mention in here for Rob Blake. I was not a Rob Blake fan when he was with the Kings, but I will throw an honorable mention Rob Blake's way because people are going to be like, where's Rob Blake? He's not in my 15 favorites. Now, if we're talking about all-time greats, and depending on how long we're waiting for hockey, I have no problem with going through all 31 teams and counting down 15 greats for every team as well. Because at least we can all agree on greats, right? Oh, right, yeah. Number 7. Am I going to put him in at 7? Yeah, I'll put him in at 7. So again, a current LA King, Anze Kopitar. You know, Kopitar is interesting. He goes 2 years ago. So last year he had a really, really good season. 2 years ago, it looked like he was kind of slow. There was something off with him 2 years ago, where it looked like maybe the game had passed him by, and he was seeming kind of slow, just a step behind. And then last year he's fantastic. This year, pretty good as well. And overall, he has been kind of the face of the Kings through there's 2 Stanley Cup wins. And again, this is a respect thing as much as anything else, where I have to give Kopitar his due. Where yes, really, really solid career, and I can't not have him on this list. You can't. You just can't not have Kopitar on the list. There are players that I can say, there's no Gretzky on here, but I was never a Gretzky fan when he played, which is part of the thing that I find funny when I do videos like, for instance, the Crosby versus Ovechkin discussion. I much prefer the Caps to the Penguins, but when we have the discussion of greatest, I do my best to stay out of it from an emotional standpoint. But when I do something like this, I don't have to do that. I can, as a fan, say I was never a fan of Gretzky's. Not really. When he was on Saturday Night Live, that's about as close as I got to being a fan of his. That's about as close as I got. And that's, Luc Robitaille's not on this list either. So people are going to be waiting for Luc Robitaille. There's going to be people skipping to the end. Where's Luc Robitaille? He's not one of my favorites. Number 6. Okay, so we're down to 6. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Larry Murphy wasn't a King for very long, but Larry Murphy was one of my favorite Kings while he was there. Absolutely one of my favorite Kings, and if they'd kept him his whole career, who knows, right? Murphy moved on and played for a number of teams, of course, most famously with Detroit. And since I have him on the Kings list, he's not going to end up on any of the others, which is a shame because he'd end up on the Pittsburgh list probably as well. I'm going to say probably because, again, over the last almost 40 years I've been watching hockey. Who knows? Maybe Murphy doesn't make the top 15 Penguins. Kevin Stevens definitely would. I don't know with Murphy. So that's sort of a spoiler for Penguins fans. Ooh, Kevin Stevens. Yeah, I loved Kevin Stevens. I thought he was fantastic. Number 5. Zygmunt Palffy. Palffy is one of those players that it's a shame he didn't have a longer career. Zygmunt Palffy was just fantastic for the Kings. Really, really was. I was surprised at the time that they got him for what they got him for. And Palffy, that was during that time where, I did kind of enjoy some of what was going on with the Kings. And that was after the Gretzky era. And they got into the next year and I kind of started pulling for the Kings a little bit again. These jerseys definitely help. Palffy wore this one. And they also had Felix Potvin for a while. He's not in my 15 favorites either. Potvin had just made me kind of angry as a Canuck fan at that point. So, yeah, he wasn't necessarily winning me over with the Kings. But Palffy did. Palffy was really, really good for the Kings. And would be more highly regarded if he played longer. It's just one of those things where he just didn't play very long. Comparatively speaking with some of his other peers. Number 4. Am I going to put him in at 4? That one. That one. That one. And that one. Yeah, I'll put this guy in at 4. This guy. Marcel Dionne. He didn't look like a hockey player. If you saw Marcel off the ice, you wouldn't think he was a star hockey player by any stretch. But Marcel Dionne was one of the best of his time. And when you look at players who it's easy to kind of overlook them a little bit because of the era they're in, Dionne gets overshadowed by guys like Gretzky and Lafleur. He though put up fantastic totals throughout his career. And when you look at the overall standings with points and goals and all of that, Marcel Dionne holds up very, very well. And he was one of my favorite players on a team that wasn't very good back in the early 80s. Dave Taylor gets an honorable mention here as well. Taylor didn't make the cut, but Dave Taylor was part of that Triple Crown line. Number 3. Okay, I'll put this guy in at number 3. So we talked about career cut short. Tragically cut short was Adam Deadmarsh's career. Deadmarsh was one of my favorite players in the league. Goes to the Kings. I'm just absolutely sold on this guy. And like I said, career was cut short. I can't say enough how much I loved every part of Adam Deadmarsh's game. And again, for people who may be younger, probably not going to realize, or know who that is or any of that. But Deadmarsh was one of my favorite Kings. So that was at a time where, I was kind of maybe sort of rooting for them. But him, absolutely. Deadmarsh, 100% yes. Number 2. So I talked about the Triple Crown line. And I love Charlie Simmer. Charlie Simmer, just goals galore. Absolutely love the guy. Charlie Simmer was one of my favorite players. So when kids were all collecting hockey cards in the 80s, I wanted Charlie Simmer cards. He was one of my favorites. And that Triple Crown line was Dionne, Simmer, and Taylor. And yeah, you can see where Dionne and Simmer are on that list. Again, Taylor's just out of there, and I know there's going to be Kings fans going, Dave, Taylor's not on the list. No, couldn't put him ahead of Hiroki Vachon. Apologies for that. But Charlie Simmer was one of my favorite players. I really enjoyed watching him play. He's pretty darn good. Really good goal scorer. And again, this was during an era where there were a lot of goals being scored. So I understand that he's not as highly regarded as he would otherwise be. Number 1. People might be surprised to see Jonathan Quick at number 1 on my list. Jonathan Quick back in, I want to say 09. It was 09 or 2010. He absolutely won me over. We had, that was the first time that I'd had the NHL Center Ice package. So I'm watching Boston, Dallas, and Vancouver. And yet I kept finding myself watching Kings games. And I was watching Kings games because Doughty, Kopitar, but Quick. Quick really stood out to me. And I was like, he's not at the top of the league in stats, but that kid is really good. And right out of the gate, I remember even, when he was a rookie and there was talk about what the Kings needed to do with goaltending. And I was like, they don't need to do anything. They got Jonathan Quick. He's going to be fantastic. So when he won the Cup in 2012, when, as an LA King, I was so proud of him and for what he was able to do. The LA Kings, their fans went through a long suffering stage there after Gretzky left. And before Gretzky arrived, that was a pretty poorly run organization. Of course, then you have the McNall ownership issue that took place and all the disastrous results from that. So in 2012, when they hold up the Cup, I was very happy for Jonathan Quick. I couldn't not be happy for Jonathan Quick. I felt like that was sort of a validation on my faith in him, and that there wasn't a goaltender at the time that I felt had earned that more. Quick had been fantastic for the Kings before that run, but that run really told the NHL how good Jonathan Quick was. And so, he's my favorite LA King of all time. And, we're reaching that stage where he's likely going to find himself either as the backup or maybe starting somewhere else as soon as next season. Well, again, with that contract and with caps and all this, like cap space and all that wonderful stuff, we'll see what happens with Quick. But no matter what happens, he's number 1 on the list. He's ahead of Deadmarsh. And if people have been a fan of this channel long enough, you know that I was a huge fan of Adam Deadmarsh. But when I look at the overall LA Kings picture, I have to go with Jonathan Quick at number 1. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.